I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
Election 2012. Next on Wyoming Chronicle. Hello, I'm Richard Eger, host of Wyoming Chronicle. Labor Day is done, summer is gone, and it's time for that quadrennial decision. Who will be the next president of the United States? And how will you cast your vote? We'll discuss the national and Wyoming picture in a few moments, but first, a reminder of the big pitch both parties made over the past few weeks.
You see, because I know Mitt Romney. And Mitt Romney will tell us the hard truths we need to hear to put us back on a path to growth and create good-paying private sector jobs again in America. Mitt Romney will tell us the hard truths we need to hear to end the torrent of debt that is compromising our future and burying our economy. Mitt Romney will tell us the hard truths we need to hear to end the debacle of putting the world's greatest health care system in the hands of federal bureaucrats and putting those bureaucrats between an American citizen and her doctor.
In Tampa, did y'all watch our convention? I did. In Tampa, the Republican argument against the president re-election was actually pretty simple, pretty snappy. It went something like this. We left him a total mess. He hadn't cleaned it up fast enough, so fire him and put us back in.
The issue is not the economy that Barack Obama inherited, not the economy that he envisions, but this economy that we are living. College graduates should not have to live out their 20s in their childhood bedrooms, staring up at fading Obama posters and wondering when they can move out and get going with life. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you what I think you already know, but I watch it up close. Bravery resides in the heart of Barack Obama, and time again, I witnessed him summon it. This man has courage in his soul, compassion in his heart, and a spine of steel.
I'm running for president to help create a better future. A future where everyone who wants a job can find a job. Where no senior fears for the security of their retirement. An America where every parent knows that their child will get an education that leads them to a good job and a bright horizon. And unlike the president, I have a plan to create 12 million new jobs. By 2020, North America will be energy independent. We'll give our fellow citizens the skills they need for the jobs of today and the careers of tomorrow. We'll make trade work for America by forging new trade agreements. We will champion small businesses, America's engine of job growth. That means reducing taxes on business, not raising them. It means simplifying and modernizing the regulations that hurt small business the most.
But know this, America, our problems can be solved. Our challenges can be met. The path we offer may be harder, but it leads to a better place. And I'm asking you to choose that future. I'm asking you to rally around a set of goals for your country. Goals in manufacturing, energy, education, national security, and the deficit. Real, achievable plans that will lead to new jobs, more opportunity, and rebuild this economy on a stronger foundation. That's what we can do in the next 4 years, and that is why I am running for a second term as President of the United States.
Well, the overtures are done, the reintroduction of the candidates, and all the hoopla. So now, the main event begins around the nation and here in Wyoming. With me to make sense of it all and perhaps a few prognostications, we have Leslie Peterson, 2010 Democratic candidate for governor and current state Democratic Party treasurer. Also, Dickie Shaner, vice chairman of the Wyoming Republican Party. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Richard.
Well, let's begin with the national picture, the presidential race, because every election you hear, this is the most important election of our lifetimes. How do you think this ranks, or can you actually think of more important decisive elections? Dickie, what's your thought?
You know, in my lifetime, it's the most critical I've seen. We're really, you know, there's a clear ideological distinction to be made between both parties. You know, the candidates for president have a divergent ideas on the role of government and federal government and the future of the country, and I think it's really critical this time around.
I think that's true. Almost all of my friends are so disgusted right now with Congress and the dysfunction in our government, and my greatest fear is that this election, as important as it is, may not really solve things. We are really more divided than we've ever been as a country. I don't see that in Wyoming nearly at all, hardly, and that's wonderful, and I hope it stays that way. But right now, the difference is so great, not only on the ideology of the parties, but really deep, fundamental personal values. The social issues are so divisive.
Well, we
It's
can
sad.
certainly get into the particulars as we go along. Not long ago, of course, the pick of Paul Ryan was very big news. How do you think that has reshaped perhaps the rest of the campaign?
I think that it was a good choice in that it electrified the base. Paul Ryan's very popular with the conservative grassroots. And, you know, the other thing it did was it sort of said, we're gonna take the lead on these issues. You know, Medicare, the budget, you know, those are hot button issues that Ryan has made very clear his stance on those things. And presidential nominee Romney said, I'm going to pick him. We're gonna be the leaders on those issues, and we're gonna take charge. And so I think it was a step to say, hey, we're not just going to run from these issues. We're going to take them head on and let the voters decide what they want.
Well, Leslie, when you saw, I'm sure, Paul Ryan descending from that battleship at his nomination, what was your reaction?
I was fairly surprised that Romney took a gamble like that, because Congressman Ryan's budget proposals are so radical compared to even the Simpson-Bowles report or any of the more reasonable attempts that have been made to solve our deficit. That was a bipartisan effort that didn't advance as I believe it should have, and I think a lot of Democrats were sorry that Obama didn't push it harder than he did. In fact, the Wyoming Democratic Party adopted a plank supporting the Simpson-Bowles report as our idea of a place to start to address the deficit problems in this country. But I hope that the election will turn more to broad issues, all of the broad issues that confront us, but it's terribly focused now on Medicare. And Paul Ryan's approach to Medicare, as we all know, is to institute a voucher program for the future. They say it won't touch anybody who's 55 or older. But beyond that, it will be a voucher that seniors use to purchase Medicare if they so choose, and that voucher will become less valuable over time. The Congressional Budget Office says it will cost seniors about $6,400 a year each in a few years more.
So presumably the
voucher's value will go down.
Wow.
So I think that Medicare will be a huge issue, and the Republicans have a strategy of trying to say that Obama's the Affordable Care Act is also taking money out of Medicare to the same degree, which I don't believe is true. But
well, let's get to the particulars of some of these issues. Medicare, of course, one that you bring up. And, of course, you know, Paul Ryan is well known for his proposals that he has espoused. I looked at a couple of figures, actually. Checked. This is a projection from the Wyoming Department of Administration at how the population is actually going to age in Wyoming. In 2000, we had just under 500,000 people and 58,000 seniors. But if you jump all the way to 2030, then we're going to have a little more population, just over 600,000. But the senior segment of the population, 65 plus, is going to be about 130,000. So it will almost triple. And remind you, that's only 18 years from now. So when you look at that aging of the population here, and of course 65 plus reliance on Medicare, how do you think that's going to play with Wyoming voters?
You know, I think that's a critical point. What you make is that, you know, we are going to have an increasing aging population, and you know, when you get down to the root of it, the real question is, are we going to be able to even pay for that? So, you know, what Paul Ryan is trying to do is save that system and make it economically feasible to carry on into the future, because on the pace we're at right now, we're just simply not going to be able to fund it. So you got to take some steps, and it's a very incremental plan. It's not a drastic, change right now, everything. It's incremental over time, and it's designed to make sure that we can keep it going.
Well, I guess, that's the central issue, isn't it? Where does the money come from for entitlements?
Clearly it's a problem, and as I just stated, we all recognize it's a problem, and we would give anything if our congressional representatives from both parties would get together. As it is now, unless they do something before the end of the year, we're projected to sink into a complete, probably a depression. But the Republicans, I think, are reluctant to address that before the end of the year, because to do so, they would appear to be raising taxes. And Grover Norquist's no taxes pledge is such a fundamental thing to the Republican legislators that they'd almost rather see the country go over a cliff than to do anything that looks like voting for additional taxes.
Well, Dickie, it's true many Republican legislators have signed a no tax increase pledge. Do you ever get the sense that a portion of the party, a large portion, is enthralled to like a Grover Norquist, or?
I think what happens is the debate is skewed to this notion of you have to increase taxes to pay for things. What the real issue is, how does government increase its revenue? And that doesn't always mean increasing taxes. You can hit a point where you're taxing too high and revenues aren't as high as they could be if you had a lower tax rate. So you have to find that sweet spot of the right tax rate where the economy is still flourishing and revenues are high. And I think that's really the heart of the debate. What is the tax rate that's going to bring in the most revenue to the government and balance, freedoms versus taxation? And I don't think that it's always just we got to pay more in taxes. We got to pay more in taxes.
Well, clearly this is the ideological divide that both of you have spoken about.
That's one of the big ideological divides, and it isn't. Most people, I think, that are thoughtful about it and want to address the deficit think that it needs to be a combination of cuts, not the kind of drastic cuts to transportation, education, school lunch programs, health, Medicaid, Medicare, and all of the things that are in the Ryan budget, which is really scary because it's too much too soon. But you need to probably have a combination of some increase in taxes. They're way lower than they were when Clinton was in office, and the economy certainly thrived then. So I think if we could get past that fear of Grover Norquist and have a little bit of both and a willingness to compromise, maybe we could improve our fiscal situation.
Well, simple question, Dickie. You're conservative. Is there any room for increase in taxes when you look at really reducing the deficit as part of the picture?
Yeah, with a $16 trillion debt facing the nation, all options have to be on the table. And like Leslie said, right now there's such a partisan climate in D.C., and it's really hard to, when you've got one side that, the Democrats don't want to cut spending, and you've got the other side that doesn't want to raise taxes. And that's what was so great about that Simpson-Bowles proposal was, let's get together and do something about this. Let's work together. Let's compromise, and because everybody can agree that we're in some serious economic times, and something needs to be done.
As James Carville famously said in 1992, it's the economy, stupid, yeah. Because that, after all, is the engine that runs all of this. How do you think that both tickets have been approaching, the revitalization of the economy? Leslie, I'll start with you.
Well, I think I'm slightly optimistic. This morning they announced that the purchase of consumer goods, durable goods, 5 years and longer type things, was up a surprising amount. I forget the percentage exactly, but it was quite encouraging. We've seen the housing market beginning to come back fairly well, and it's been better than expected over several months. We still have serious problems with high unemployment and many other things. I think one of the most disturbing things to me is to see the shrinking middle class. And the Republican desire to cut taxes for the very wealthy on the Ryan budget and increase them on the middle tax will only hurt us further as a country, because we're healthiest and our economy is healthiest when the middle class thrives. And right now the middle class is far lower than it has ever been in the last, I mean, it's gone from 60% of gross national product to 45% or so, about that in the last couple of decades. It continues to shrink. And trickle-down economics has not ever worked. We tried it under Reagan and it didn't work. We've tried it under Bush and it didn't work. And now Romney is taking us back to it. And I think it's a tragic thing to watch the middle-class people, the hard-working people of this country, have a harder and harder time making ends meet. And a refusal to increase taxes, address the budget problems, and have a greater fairness in tax policy.
So that's a lot to respond to.
Certainly, but you know, I mean, they're having a lot of criticisms that you know, a lot of those strategies have been tried before. You know, many of them harken back to the George W. Bush era. You know, including the tax cuts for the highest income levels.
Again, you know, there's all sorts of numbers being thrown around by each side, and I disagree with the notion that it's just going to be a tax break for the wealthy. I mean, you know, Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan have put forward a bold plan to simplify the tax code, which I think is critical to this. You know, taking it from six different rates down to 2, and just making it simpler, you know, more certainty involved, and you know that's a big thing. As far as the middle class goes, the middle class isn't doing well right now, and that's, you know, indicative of these last 4 years of a dismal economy. What's important is that I think the pick of Paul Ryan and with Governor Romney's private sector experience and really just focusing on the economy, like you touched on, you know, that's the biggest thing going for the Republicans right now. Is, look, are you better off now than you were, you know, 3 years ago? And you know, most people will probably say no.
Well, of course, the economy was in a pretty bad state at the end of the Bush administration, to be fair, and I think all have acknowledged that. There is an aspect.
Interject one thing, if I could.
One thing.
I'd just like to say that that Congressman Ryan has said that he has grand plans, a bold proposal for addressing tax policy and closing loopholes. But in all of the interviews and questions that have been directed about that, he's never defined a single one that I know of. And I think that that is a problem for a lot of people. I do also want to, before we leave, address the huge social issues that divide us. And I think that that is one of the things we're going to see most clearly at these national conventions. The Republicans are going to adopt a platform, it appears, that is against abortion even in the case of rape or incest. That's a huge step to the right, and it appears that's going to happen. And I think most people in Wyoming, we've always been tolerant in Wyoming. We've always been kind of live and let live, and have felt that government really shouldn't intrude into the bedroom, period.
Well, of course, in the light of the remarks made by Congressman Aiken in the Missouri race on legitimate rape, among other things, I mean, do you think, does that have some resonance here in Wyoming? Do you think it will affect the race in any way?
It will affect the presidential race?
Yes.
You know, it's tough to say. The media sure has been covering it a lot, and I know that I just heard the other day that there's been a 20-point swing in that Senate race in Missouri to where it's, I believe Aiken was up about 10%, and now he's down 10%. So it certainly has had a negative effect on his campaign. You know, I mean,
does it ring any alarm bells here, do you think?
I don't personally think so. I mean, there's congressmen that say, I mean, we all know Vice President Joe Biden says some wild things. I don't really think it detracts from President Obama, and I don't think Congressman Aiken's going to detract from Governor Romney.
Well, I wanted to address certainly an issue of real substance, which is, of course, the future of the Affordable Care Act. This is before we get to Wyoming-specific issues, because this is probably hinging on the result of the election, the future of it. Many more Wyoming residents would be covered if the Affordable Care Act were to proceed. Is that a choice that that you think could have an effect in this election, Leslie?
I think it's one of the issues. I don't think hardly anybody votes just on one issue. It's the whole package. Certainly we have like 17% of our Wyoming people who are not covered. I think it's so, our whole medical system is broken. And right now, many people can only get care when they go to an emergency room, when they're far past the state where they should have dealt with the problem, and the taxpayers pick up the tab. We know the system is broken. I believe there are many great aspects about the Affordable Care Act, and that we will be able to fix it over time and make it better and cover people and have a lot more preventive care so people don't end up in the emergency rooms. And the Republicans say that they want to get rid of it, but they have no options. We have never heard anything about specifically what will take its place if they get
Dickie,
thrown out.
when you look at the fact that such things as no pre-existing conditions for children are now in effect, and Governor Romney has said he wants to repeal the entire act. I mean, do you support that?
Support repealing?
Well, basically repealing, that kind of protection for families.
Well, I think that the act it's as you talked about, it's massive, and sure, there are certain things in it that are great, but I do support repealing it and starting over. I think that the things that are accomplished through that Obamacare can be accomplished through other means at a much less expense to the people of this country. So I do support getting rid of it. That's not to say that there aren't some things in there that would be good for the people of Wyoming. It's just not the right way to go about it.
Well, you clearly would like to make that choice very, very clear and apparent. How do you do that? How do you go about reaching voters? As Democrats.
Well, I know from the polling in Wyoming and from my own gubernatorial campaign that most people in Wyoming do not like that act. I think that's changing now. The polls nationally show that it's pretty split in the country now on the Affordable Care Act. But as people learn more about it and see the coverage that it affords, the fact that parents can keep their kids on the policies till 26, there's so many aspects about it now that are appealing to people. I think over time it may become accepted if we don't throw it out completely and start over. I'd just like to mention one other thing, if I could, that I think is hugely different between the two parties. And I feel it's sort of funny in a way because the younger demographic in this country is clearly pro-choice, and they're also much more comfortable with gay marriage than the older generations. Here I am, the older generation, and Dickie's the newer generation, and I'm the one who's for choice, and I'm for keeping the government out of the bedrooms, and I don't care if somebody loves somebody. I think that's fine, and I think that's a huge other social issue that divides us, and it's surprising that you are here representing the positions you are when the younger generation's the other way.
I would certainly like to move to more Wyoming specific, and I think there are aspects of what you just said that reflected in this the primaries that were held this year in Wyoming in August, because there was a lot of conservative organizations that were vetting basically the Republican candidates to see if they were conservative enough. How would you rank, now that we've seen the results of the primaries, the influence of the Tea Party, the very conservative movement?
If I could just touch on...
And if you want to answer anything that you just said.
I could get my one.
You may.
I think that this is, it's funny. It's just kind of indicative of how, the presidential campaign has been going. The Democratic Party is really focused on social issues and this so-called war against women. And I think the Republicans are really trying to just say, look, let's focus on the economy. Let's focus on these major issues that are facing our country. And, I think that's what the people are going to have to, decide. What type of leader are you looking for, and what are the issues that concern you?
Well, as vice chair, of course, of the state Republican Party, you must have seen that many incumbent members of the legislature survived the challenge, but there were some pretty close races, and some of them actually did go down to defeat. What kind of effect do you think that's going to have on the next legislature?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know
do
this.
You expect more emphasis than before on The social issues?
Well, there was a lot on this in this last session, so I don't know if it'll be more than that.
Well, there's always room for more.
Yeah. You know, there were some very close races. There were some incumbents that got knocked off, and in particular, I saw the one article on
Representative
Childers.
Yes.
You know, said it was that social issue that. But you know, it's certainly a battle, and I think it's always going to be, at least in Wyoming, being involved with the grassroots and the party, those issues are on people's mind. They certainly are.
Well, we're running pretty low on time. I did want to mention that only 1 in 4 registered voters actually turned out for this. How does that affect, do you think?
They'll be there in force for the presidential election, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Well, you know...
we have a high percentage turnout, usually in Wyoming, especially in presidential
Well, this was
years.
the lowest in 30 years,
Yeah.
so we'll see what kind of effect it has. I did want to ask you, Leslie, with 90 seats in the legislature, the Democrats have only put up, well, not even enough candidates to cover a third of that. How are you going to move to get the Democratic Party more involved, more relevant?
Well, I hope we can. We did a lot of work on recruitment, but it's very difficult and discouraging. Not too many people can serve in the legislature just because of the complications of leaving home and family and work and so forth. And when the registration is so greatly one-sided, it's hard to get people to run. And the more it goes that way, the harder it is to get people to run.
Okay. Well, we are really out of time, but I have a real final question. Who is the trifecta? White House, Senate, and House. Who wins?
Oh, predictions?
Yeah, predictions.
I think Republicans take back the Senate and the White House.
Okay.
And I think the opposite. I hope the opposite.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
Well, I have another question. Is the gridlock going to end?
Boy, I wish it would.
Yeah, it'd be tough to say.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it won't.
Well, that is the final word for now. So my thanks to Leslie Peterson, Dickie Shaner, and be sure to join us next week as we take a look at the drought that has so affected the state and the nation. For Wyoming Chronicle, I'm Richard Aker.